I don't think John Hollinger has ever said anything really glowing about the Sacramento Kings.
Okay.
Now, in all fairness, there hasn't been a ton
Nope.
since he's been with the Athletic. Last year was a good example, but I always feel like it's very challenging for him to just even give him a little love. So John Hollinger wrote a piece, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Morgan.
Okay.
5 teams that will fall short of expectations this year.
Love expectations.
And he goes by the over-under. He mentions Oklahoma City, which
Okay.
a lot of teams are high on.
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix, or a lot of people are high on. The Phoenix Suns,
Yep.
the Chicago Bulls, the Orlando Magic, and your Sacramento Kings. He says they will be under 44.5 wins this year. They won 48 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take a guess before I read some of this to all you guys? You guys want to take a guess about like what was one of the things he brought up with the Kings last year?
Okay, I'm gonna guess because I was couldn't wait till you told me, but I'm gonna guess the defense, right?
No, he definitely brings up the defense. But okay, let me rephrase that question. What was one of the things that he was mentioning? Like, look, I know they were good last year, but what was his but about the Kings?
But they were healthy.
They were healthy.
Oh no, not this. No.
Here's his call. He did give a little love at the beginning. He says Sacramento is going into the year after the year, coming off one of the all-time vibe seasons in NBA history.
Fair.
The crowds were amazing, and the beam was the greatest invention since fire. But this is a new season, and things could get a little tricky.
Okay.
So I like it. He tried to butter up the fan base a little bit.
Cute.
Like, hey, maybe if I'm nice, and then I get into it.
Yeah.
He says, let's start with injuries, or rather, lack of them.
No.
Historically, everybody being healthy all year hasn't been a sustainable life hack, so the Kings' insane durability last season is highly unlikely to repeat itself. Gutting out survivable injuries the way Domantas Sabonis did a year ago helps at the margins, but most of the time when bones break and muscles pull, the only fix is an extended absence. Sacramento has virtually no chance of being more healthy than last season and a huge chance of reverting to the mean. It helps that the Kings' top players all have strong records of durability and are comparative. I can't even talk right now. They are young, but even if they're young, top 7 vets, not including Keegan Murray, played the same number of games they did last in the 21-22 season, the Kings would lose 43 more man games to injury. Murray played 80 games himself. That number seems likely to go down this year.
Let's break that down.
Yeah, and then we'll go into the rest.
Sure.
I feel like I understand the argument that the Kings were relatively healthy.
Because they were on NBA standards of not sitting out.
Yeah. But like we talked to Fox, he was banged up, played through it. You know, Trey Lyles had some things, but like guys played through things, and then I don't know, Domantas Sabonis literally played through it. We saw in the playoffs, like Fox and Sabonis playing banged up and hurt. Yeah, I think guys are going to miss more games this year in all likelihood. But like, if that's like your big argument, I'm like, I also think that you can make the case that the Kings are much deeper than they were last year and can withstand if a guy is out for a little bit.
So not only you're totally right. Not only having more of that depth and seeing what Mike Brown can do with that depth, if they have to have that next man up mentality because someone is out because of an extended absence. But I think the thing that you really got to look at is a lot of these bodies are still young enough where they are they're pushing through the banged up injuries, the broken thumbs, all this other shit that they went through, instead of being one of the other teams in the NBA that go, we got to sit him out, or we should sit him out. Oh my God, hey, it's better if he sits out with that injury. When really most people, anyone that's played sports, how many injuries have you played through, right? And I think sometimes overprotecting these players with that has hurt teams a lot. And that's why with the Kings, it was nice to see so many guys like, all right, put dirt on it. Let's go. Let's make sure we make this postseason.
The one thing he did mention in the next paragraph that the Kings have arguments in their favor, starting with the overall age of the roster and continuing toward the potential for Murray to break out in his second season after shredding Summer League. On the other hand, this team was 25th in defense, and there's not much reason to expect that figure to improve. The Kings lack a wing stopper and have zero rim protection. The only plus defender is backup guard Davion Mitchell, whose offense made him borderline unplayable in the postseason. Now, that line, I get. I don't think that the Kings did a crazy amount to improve, but I think there were more stretches last year where they played some good defense. And you saw a little bit in the playoffs, and I think the second year thing matters. I also think you saw more signs from De'Aaron Fox, even adding some like JaVale McGee to the mix. I'm surprised someone like him would not mention that they were 8th in defensive rating on the road.
That's your favorite stat. You say they didn't do anything crazy to improve. I think sometimes we get really caught up in people think of improving is automatically adding a defensive individual. And obviously that is improvement, but there's other ways of improvement. I think even just alone, when you look at the continuity and the chemistry and the way that Mike Brown helped this team become a better defensive team as the season went on, Exhibit A, look at the playoffs, look at what type of team they became. Who's to say they can't become that same type of defensive team starting this season?
I just think they have a ceiling as this group until they add that piece. I mean, I think they're going to be better defensively. I really do think they're going to be better.
I agree with that. And I'm not acting like even middle of the pack better. I just think that they're going to be a better defensive team. But his point off of last year is valid.
He said the Kings used their offseason capital to secure the core of the team, essentially surrounding their first-round pick to turn Rashawn Holmes' cap number into a rich extension for Sabonis. That left them with limited resources to upgrade a roster whose shaky depth was largely masked by the durability of the top players. The Kings rarely had to get into the soft underbelly of their roster last season because of their health. Only 10 players played more than 400 minutes, and only 8 topped 1,000. At the margins, they did some stuff, which is a disgusting, backhand John Hollinger compliment, right? Is that even a compliment? They did some stuff. That's how I took it.
Okay.
They did some, that's your analysis. At the margins, they did some stuff. Replacing Terrence Davis with Chris Duarte is likely a wash, but does give him a bit more size in the wing, something that was in short supply with the bench. Yeah. And I think that, Terrence Davis, more explosive of a scorer. He can drop 30 on you. Chris Duarte, he's going to be a guy that could come off, dribble handoffs. He's got a little more size, can defend a little bit. Showed that he can hit the three in his first season in the NBA, wasn't healthy in the second season.
Look, and I hope that we are talking about with Chris Duarte that having Domas Sabonis back on his team and feeling that connection again is something else that takes his game back to the next level. Not only obviously being healthy again, but also having that. And I think they both have talked about that before. Again, you can't bank on that, but it's something you did see promise in even in his first year in the league.
He also mentioned Sasha adds a slow but crafty shooter who could further juice what was the league's top regular season offense a year ago. ... And could also make a bad defense even worse. The Kings also made an attempt to add some rim protection by signing JaVale McGee, but he's 35 and was unplayable in Dallas last season. I don't expect the Kings to be bad or anything, but I do see them as a fairly obvious team that drops. He called it a plexiglass principle, a team that's going to drop. It seems very reasonable to expect the Kings to take a half step back after outkicking their coverage 1 year ago, especially given how crowded the West looks.
His JaVale McGee breakdown, I thought that was...
I think it was a bad fit in Dallas.
That's where I look at it as. I go, unplayable with that team on that roster. So anyway, that would be my one thing.
I think overall, I don't think he's giving enough credit to, one, how good the offense was. And adding Sasha, he could help the offense, but he's slow and his defense can be bad. He didn't get enough credit to hey, there were some defensive moments here or there or in the playoffs. I understand some of the questions. I just think their offense, which was really explosive last year, can be even more explosive this year. I think the defense could be better just with another year together. I think he was a little dismissive of it. As far as the win total, yeah, I mean, I could see this team not winning as many games this year. It's all totally possible. If they're not as healthy, they could win 45 games.
Sure.
And the West is hard.
Well, I mean, that alone. And also, you look at other teams around the West, and every season we go, oh man, is it going to be these guys? Is it going to be these guys? And just track record with those teams, those guys that I keep just saying, those guys are usually teams that all have health issues, right? I mean, their star players aren't playing games in the beginning of the season, so then they're not even building chemistry. So then when they are healthy at the end of the season, there is no chemistry there. It just doesn't work.
Well, and that's what's wild to me. Like, if you're going to question teams maybe not living up to the hype, why? I'd be more willing to be like, hey, the Lakers, and here's why. LeBron and AD haven't proven they could stay healthy the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But when they do, it looks great. To me, I don't think the Kings staying healthy and guys fighting through stuff should be a knock on their potential as a group. Like, hey, I mean, they're not going to be this healthy. It's like, okay, like, let's just say they're not as healthy. How many wins does that drop them? You know, there's also games at the end of the year you go, they probably should have had 50 games. So I don't think it makes that dramatic of a difference. Now, if they lose Sabonis or Fox for an extended time, yeah, it's going to hurt just like any team would get hurt if they lost one of their star guys.
Yeah. It's, again, I think for one of the teams to go after in this league, I thought that was an interesting choice. Because I don't know why you wouldn't feel like, oh, maybe they can grow off of what they started to build. But it's kind of like you said, there's a lot of people in this business, in this league that kind of feel like it was a fluke or like.
I told you this the other night.
Yeah.
Morgan. I told you this after media day. People go sleep on this team. It's okay. Sleep on them. That's fine.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm not acting like they're
That's good.
flawless. Like, the defense is the biggest question mark for me this year.
Absolutely. The defense and teams obviously knowing a little bit more of what they're made of, but they knew what they were made of last year and still couldn't stop a guy or force him to go right, or they couldn't, stop a guy in clutch minutes. So it's like they couldn't do it then. So we'll see what they can do this season.